Defense Agency has said Israeli fire killed at least 72 people in the Palestinian territory. The death toll includes 21 people who had gathered to receive aid in central and southern Gaza. At least 300 Palestinians have been killed in recent weeks while trying to reach aid distribution points in Gaza, which is suffering from famine-like conditions. As per the Gaza Health Ministry, in early March, Israel imposed an aid blockade on Gaza amid a deadlock in truce negotiations, only partially easing restrictions. In late May, after Israel loosened its blockade, the privately run Gaza Humanitarian Foundation began distributing aid, but its operations have been marred by chaotic scenes. Now we have guests joining us for this discussion, Laura Stanscheit. She's a Middle East expert joining us live from Germany. Thank you for joining us today, Laura, and welcome to NewsX World. What is the European Union's assessment of the current humanitarian conditions in Gaza, especially with reports of famine-like situation and 300 deaths near aid sites recently?
Well, thank you very much. I think the European Union in the past months has been pushing very much towards the direction that more aid has to reach Gaza and that agreements have to be reached. However, realistically, that always poses a more difficult reality with the most recent deaths that have occurred. I think the IDF has not released an official statement yet, but generally speaking, I would say the European Union, especially in the past weeks, has been really pushing towards more diplomacy in that matter, and also more aid to reach Gaza, which did happen in the past weeks, which I guess is a very positive development, and we will have to see where this is going to head.
And building on that, Laura, is there a case for deploying neutral third-party monitors for humanitarian corridors backed by international guarantees so that we can avoid further aid-related deaths?
To support further aid or to avoid further aid?
To support further aid, but to avoid further deaths near aid sites.
Well, I think right now there is no big initiative of third parties joining. However, right now seeing the Iran conflict arising and more diplomacy being pushed, that might be a solution. That might be a solution in the future. However, I believe that Israel is very much able to handle this on their own because the situation on site is very, very difficult on both sides. So we kind of question whether a European side in this could help.
And given that many deaths occurred at aid distribution points, do you believe Israel is doing enough to distinguish between military and civilian targets?
Well, I believe very much so that Israel is doing their best to prevent civilian casualties. However, at these aid points, you have a lot of problems arising, and you have, of course, always both sides releasing their statements on what happened there. I think Gaza is just a very tumultuous area right now in general. But yeah, I believe so that Israel has been doing their best to prevent civilian casualties, especially with the current aid situation, which has been increasing. And I think it's, generally speaking, a positive development that we have been seeing there.
And Laura, according to you, should countries like France, Germany, take a firmer stance towards Israel?
I think Germany especially, and also France, have been taking a very firm stand when it comes to Gaza, and these firm stands have been increasing in the past weeks. I think where we've been seeing a switch right now is with everything that has been happening in Iran, and then with that we have been seeing a general switch in communication of the West towards Israel and towards the overall global conflict. So I think if anything or anyhow, the stances of the West have been kind of like decreasing in the sense of talking about firm stance, this would be related to Iran. I see that especially Germany has been very, very firm in the past weeks that Israel has to follow like humanitarian ideals when it comes to the contribution of aid, and also when it comes to the civilian casualties in Gaza. So I think a more firm stand is not needed as of right now. We just see priorities shift with also, I believe, the West kind of waking up to what this conflict actually is about.
And Laura, since you are in Germany, do you see any pro-Hamas, Israel rallies or pro-Palestine rallies, and are European governments now voicing more for Gaza because they are facing domestic pressure to reconsider their arms sales or diplomatic cooperation with Israel in light of these developments?
So what we've seen is pro-Israeli rallies kind of decreasing in the past weeks, as I've been part of those a lot in the past months, and also in the past years. We have immense security issues with pro-Israeli rallies, which is a huge issue. If you ask me, we do have a lot of pro-Palestinian rallies, especially when you look at big cities like Berlin. However, I do not believe that poses a domestic pressure, especially on the German government, to act in a more pro-Palestinian sense. I believe quite on the contrary. These rallies tend to be very extremist, very pro-Hamas, very pro-Islamistic, and it kind of creates an opposite effect on Western governments, especially the German government, because these rallies, they tend to have a very negative reputation. So I do not believe that as of right now these rallies serve Gaza in any way.
That raises this natural question that how is this humanitarian crisis affecting Europe's credibility in the region, especially when compared to its swift support for Ukraine during wartime?
Excuse me, the internet was back. Can you repeat the question?
Yes. So I wanted to ask, how is this humanitarian crisis and the reaction of German government and different reaction within the population of Germany? As you said, there's more pro-Palestine rallies and also pro-Israel rallies. How is this affecting the credibility in the region, especially when compared to its swift support for Ukraine during wartime?
I think the German government especially has been struggling with their credibility in general over the past months. So we just had a rather tumultuous change within our government for German history, let's say. So they struggle with credibility in general as of right now. And then in the past months, you've seen that a lot of people do really call for humanitarianism in Germany. And then again, you have to lead it back a bit to the Iran conflict. I feel like many people in Germany who have been kind of calling for Gaza in the past weeks and have been very vocal about Israel, they are kind of taking a few steps back because they're seeing this conflict on a more broader scale, on a more global scale, on a more international scale. And so I feel like we've been having a huge drift within society when it comes to being let's say, anti-Israel in Germany. However, I see this changing a bit, and you also see that in the language of the German government right now, with our chancellor saying that Israel, as of right now, is doing the dirty work for the rest of the world. So I believe that in the next few weeks, again, we're going to see a swift within the German society when it comes to that. But that is mostly linked to Iran, not so much on the conflict in Gaza as itself, but it will have huge effects on the discussion.
And lastly, what is next with the truce negotiation deadlocked and no ceasefire in sight? What do you think is next for this conflict to prevent further humanitarian collapse?
Well, that's a very difficult question because I feel like that the current developments in Iran also play a big part in that. I think the weaker Iran gets, the more the more space there is for Israel again to negotiate with Gaza. So it kind of depends on how the Middle East also will develop within the next weeks and months, and I think there's a lot of room for development there. However, we should call for the negotiations there to continue. We should not only focus on the Iran conflict right now. It is very important that deals are reached, and then especially that we keep on negotiating for the hostages. I think that should be also the number one priority of the Israeli government right now, which is happening. So yeah, it will develop further, and Israel will continue very close talks to Gaza, trying to get the hostages back. So not that much of a change, but on an international scale, things might change a little. We'll see. Also, the international community might back Israel a bit more in the upcoming weeks, so that will help.
Thank you very much, Laura Stanshade, for joining us and bringing your expertise as a Middle East expert to our conversation.